Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Satellite data today was quite revealing of this pattern we're currently in, and that includes this stretched out frontal boundary that's sitting right here, stretching all the way from the southeast into the southern plains, where we saw a tremendous amount of rain. Just a reminder, some of the rain that came out of some of these storms today, that of course you've probably heard a lot in the national news about the flooding in Dallas, began as a tropical system more than a week ago that has been pulled back around through the southwest monsoon and now caught up in this front. And as we see here, the sun rising today and going towards sunset this evening, those storms just continued to build, and we can see them all the way now getting into parts of southern Texas. We also see some scattered storms in parts of New England, and while there's a lot of fair weather cumulus throughout the Midwest, big storms continue to roll through our very potent southwestern monsoon, and we also saw some larger storms coming in parts of Dakotas today. So this is kind of our snapshot here as the sun was setting this evening. Over the last 72 hours, we see the kind of the swirl around the upper level low that was sitting here that's now moved. You saw it just a moment ago spinning through parts of New England. It did bring some much needed rain through parts of the Corn Belt, right in through here in the eastern Corn Belt. And then, of course, some of the rains that have come down here on these storms just in the last 3 days have been well in excess. Well, they go off my color bar, which I stop at 10 inches. So some places here have picked up a substantial amount of rainfall. The storms that came through the northwest over the weekend did produce some hail. Some of these did. And we're going to continue to see this map evolve in kind of a big way here over the next 15 days. I want to get into that very soon here. But I did misspeak this morning, I think, in my morning report about the impact this was having on cotton. And, a few of you had just messaged me about really how late some of the germination was in cotton and where the current cotton crop is. And just a reminder, when we think about where our big cotton acres are, they're back a bit farther to the west and where some of that extremely heavy rainfall was right in through here. So some beneficial rains, but so far there was so much damage to this cotton crop earlier this year in parts of Texas that even the rains, while welcomed for the overall drought picture, are not going to be largely corrective on the health of the crop here. So I just wanted to make that clarification after this morning, just speaking on it. From here, though, I would like to show you, this is my forecasting tool for Dallas, and I was just noticing, just take a look at these numbers. The last 24 hours, almost 10 inches. The last 72 hours, over 10 inches of total rainfall. And if I scroll to the bottom of my forecast graphics here, I'll just take you down quickly to it. You can see this is the last 12, 24, 48, and 72. So just a tremendous amount of rain in the last 2 days. And look at what this did to their precipitation. So they were sitting right here, just flatlining back in June, July, and August, off by about 30% of normal precipitation. And this one event now makes the yearly statistic up at 112%. That's why we cannot look at long-term, statistics for precipitation in a given growing season as a metric to what's actually happening. This was much more devastating than these two huge rainfall events, one here and one here. So I just wanted to point that out. But just keeping this in context, Twitter was very interesting today because not only was I watching just these storms, some of my colleagues made some outstanding animations with radar of this, but we were seeing a lot of video evidence of the flooding happening in Dallas. But I was mostly interested in a lot of the pictures that I was seeing that showed, like Karen Braun. If you're not following her in ag, she's a great follow. Just put out some incredible pictures here of what the crop tour is looking like right now. And there was a lot of discussion today, and just looking at her pictures here, about issues with tipback. Now, I am not a corn expert, I don't study this, but I've been told by several colleagues that when you see these issues, which are likely due to pollination issues or issues with grain fill, that weather, of course, plays a major role in this. And so I was thinking about that, and I would like to put together at least some bit of information that I hope you all can find use in. The first thing is this. Let's take a look at the latest soil moisture data. So this is down at 16 inches or 40 centimeters. And we continue to see there are large areas in through here that have missed out on this better precipitation, including parts of Florida. So pockets of drought still remain, and they are quite large. What I'd then now like to do is I'd like to take you over and show you some NDVI imagery. So I make it such that these bright colors over here on this side of the spectrum are where the crop looks very healthy from space, and then the NDVI values drop here. And specifically, I'm focusing in on the areas that have missed out some of this rainfall. So we kind of zoom in here into the Central Plains and Western Corn Belt. We can really start to see how quickly we lose the healthy vegetation as you go westward, Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And that's normal, but this particular year, the change has been quite significant. And by the way, we can still see damage, from the severe weather we saw earlier in the year, like some of the crop damage in certain places here that where it never really recovered. There's also right around York still quite a bit of damage in here as well. But the other tool I want to show you is the one we looked at a couple weeks ago, and I just want to show you where those states are when we look at their NDVI imagery compared to the 20-year average. So Nebraska sitting well below average. If we click off there and go to Kansas, we can also see sitting well below average. If average is somewhere around 0.55, we're down here around 0.45, somewhere in that vicinity. And we can also take that off and take a look at Oklahoma. Very similar story, and same thing with Texas. So this is the area where we're seeing issues. And if we come over to Iowa, just as an example, still below. Whoops, sorry. Let's click off of those so you only see Iowa. Iowa's closer to average. Illinois is sitting here close to the top of its average. There's been a lot of great precipitation across Illinois. We just jump over to Indiana, same story here. So let's just keep this tool in the back of our mind, and just a useful tool which I linked for you. I'll be sure to put it in the link again today so you can have a look at it. But these are the new maps I created, and I hope they offer some guidance in this. So I went back to June 15th and ran this up until 2 days ago with the PRISM data, which always has a 2-day lag in the data because of quality check. And the map you're looking at here represents the number of days with a high temperature above 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So I put numbers over the top to make it a little clearer. So now we're trying to identify those areas that saw sustained heat this summer. And I'm primarily focusing here in the Central Plains because it's normal to have that heat here and in the Central Valley of California. But then I wanted to take this and add 2 other dimensions to it. Let's step up the temperature threshold, and this is now 100 degrees. So again, this is the PRISM data. We're looking at high temperatures at over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the number of days. So parts of Kansas and Oklahoma since June 15th have had anywhere between 10 and 30 days with highs over 100. Same thing for parts of western Nebraska, although the numbers here is about 3 to 10. And it hits parts of South Dakota as well. You can also see some heat down in Georgia, very important, and also in the Columbia Basin, which is a bit more common. But Texas has had just an extreme amount of heat, so has Oklahoma, with many, many days well above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But there's another dimension to this as well, and that's how warm the overnight temperatures are. And if you go here, you'll see that those overnight lows that were above 70, so from June 15th to August 20th, how many nights had overnight lows above 70? This is, especially for a corn crop, this could just continue to add stress in the overnight hours just by basically affecting the corn's respiration rates and other factors. So I hope that this maybe helps explain some of those stresses, because if we add to that the precipitation side of this, we can really start to identify those areas that are off by quite a bit. Now when you're looking at this map, this goes back to April 1, so a little bit longer time frame, but it looks at departure from normal. And what you do notice is that from Texas to Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, into Iowa, and stretching across central Illinois into this part of Indiana, so that whole region, we're missing out on anywhere between 3 and 10 inches of rain. And that's really been quite devastating to the crop in those areas. And we're going to have to just see how this plays out as we continue to get the crop to our numbers. Just want to make a point that this map does not include the heavy rain yet. Remember, it only goes through August 20th. There's a 2-day check on this, which is why the data are a little bit older. Now, were we expecting this? All right, we've discussed for a long time about the prevalence of La Niña, and we're going to talk more about it in a second. But I just want to remind you, those summers that had stronger La Niñas are listed here, and I looked at the June to August precipitation anomalies, the composite anomalies. So when you look at this map, all right, and then you come back and compare it to this, there are a lot of similarities. The drought area did hit hard in the central part of the United States. It just built farther south in this particular case. And at times it really hammered the mid-south here. So a little bit different, but overall the pattern was still kind of there. Okay, so we have to look and say, all right, if the La Nina did have a pretty strong influence this summer, what is it going to do this fall? Because over the last month, we have continued to see strong trade winds causing upwelling in through here, giving us the cold water servicing. The biggest changes are the heat that was here Remember, we had some places here that were like 8 degrees Celsius above normal. That has since faded and spread out a bit. We have a lot of warm water in the North Pacific and also in the North Atlantic, and this is really helping to adjust the position of our big subtropical highs. I'm going to talk about the one of the Atlantic in a few moments here. But elsewhere around the country, around the world, we still have that really strong negative Indian Ocean dipole effect. That's where we get these westerly wind bursts here. If you have a lot of easterly winds here, the end result is the meeting is there, and that's where the air rises. Now, those strong easterly winds have allowed for some serious upwelling, and using one of my favorite sites, Tropical Tidbits, I went over here and clicked on Analysis Tools and then went down to the Ocean Analysis. And what I did was I clicked on the graphic that shows you those central equatorial Pacific ocean temperatures. That's these right inside this bounding box. And what I want to illustrate, for you is this, that since May to mid-July, those temperatures came up. In fact, they were right here at minus 0.2 C. That is, we would call that neutral, okay, for a La Nina. But then those trade winds kicked back up, and now we're back down here a full degree Celsius below normal, which means that going into the end of this summer and toward fall, we have a pretty healthy La Nina on our hands. Now, this is just my opinion as I analyze the weather. I see that the La Nina is the most dominant teleconnection. I think it's got a grip on the MJO, preventing it from really jumping out of its current phase space and moving. And I think it is dominating also what's happening in the Atlantic Ocean. And how I see that is by looking at these strong trades. I mean, if you just look at that, for the next 15 days getting into September, they continue. Same thing with the westerly wind bursts, which have now corrected back toward westerly after last week's slight deviation from normal. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that the issue with keeping this La Nina around, it just seems to be very consistent. So even looking at some new data, I've already showed you the European model. Let's just look at the new data from the NMME. This is now all the way out to October, November, December. We just continue to see the models giving us that same look. There's not a whole lot of deviation from this as we go forward. So how do we start to stitch this together then? Well, using those same years in September, we tended to see wetter conditions here, wetter conditions along the East Coast. It tended to be drier in Florida, but take a look. The upper Midwest, Western Corn Belt, getting back here into parts of Montana, September did favor drier conditions. Now, most of these years, especially some of the big ones like 2011, 2021, 89, some of these were big hurricane years as well. So that's why you're seeing these high precipitation amounts in these areas. And of course, a lot of what you've got going on, here was from that late 2012 season, adding all that rainfall. So I don't think you'd be surprised then if I showed you the new European weeklies for September. They look like this. So do you see how we're favoring possibly wetter conditions in through here with an area on the backside showing up drier? So that's just very consistent with what we would expect for a La Nina in September. And overall, I can't disagree with this. And just a reminder, in fact, let's go pull this up real quick. CPC. This is also consistent. I showed this last week with NOAA's outlook for the month of September. All right, so we see that the drier bias here. So it fits in very well with a La Nina looking like this. Okay, so let's, if we make that assumption that the tropical cyclone season will get going, we need to be on the lookout for what we call homegrown systems that develop rapidly in the Gulf. That typically happens more in the second half of the hurricane season. And right now we're watching out here in the open Atlantic. Now, looking at some satellite data, so bring this into near term here. We have been keeping a very close eye on the convection you see in here. This, as we get to the end of this animation, this may just be a diurnal signal, but it's really kind of faded out here. But the latest update as of 8 p.m. this evening Eastern Time is that the National Hurricane Center is giving this a 30% chance of development. Now, I've been discussing this with a few of my colleagues, and one of the things that my colleague Matt Reardon pointed out today to me is that should this system start to develop here and then move its way in this direction, there's an interesting setup happening over here where there is this kind of flow that's doing something like this, really increasing the wind shear out ahead of it, this trough that just sits right off the coast. And as a result, that's either going to bend this system, should it continue to develop, back out to open ocean, or just shear it apart. So that's why you don't see a lot of great model agreement on where this could possibly be going here in the near term. So let's watch this. It's some activity in the tropics, but could be more behind it. That's what I think we need to keep an eye on. All right. From there, next week's worth of rainfall. We still have the lingering front down south, adding more precipitation into the mix. We're then going to watch a system curl up into the Hudson Bay and leave a frontal boundary here. Later on this weekend, a system's going to come off of that front and possibly bring in better chances of storms as the Gulf opens back up and transports some moisture here. And I think some of these storms late this week and into the weekend could be severe, and I want to talk more about that in just a second here. So let's pick it up with the near-term forecast, though. This is the high-res NAM, and let's start it right about when I'm recording here in the evening. So into the overnight hours, we continue to see a low-pressure system sitting at the end of the Red River here, and it's just going to slowly spin, adding more rain to those places that have already picked up a tremendous amount of rain. We then see getting here into the evening on Tuesday. So this is overnight tonight into Tuesday morning, afternoon, and evening. We then watch through Tuesday afternoon and evening. Complexes of storms are expected in northern plains and also in New England. And then we're going to see what happens here. This is now Wednesday morning, getting toward Wednesday afternoon and evening. Now at that point, we're going to see our first frontal boundary sagging here and keeping storms kind of all along this arcing line from the UP through Wisconsin, back pockets of the Central Plains, but pushing up against the Rocky Mountains here in Montana. And from there, I want to show you where this pattern is going to go so you can see how this is all going to evolve at the end of this week. So there's our upper level lows just sitting here. This was once closed. It's opened back up by Tuesday, and it's moving out into the northeast. What's interesting is we end up getting a little bit of a high over low ridge here, but it's not blocked. This pattern is open. It's very long wave, and it's moving. So through Thursday, getting into Friday, we start to see two short waves coming off of this main trough. Here's one, here's two, and they come right out of British Columbia, through Alberta, into Montana, and then they really just dive right here by Saturday and Sunday. Now at this same time, the subtropical ridge sits here. So there's going to be open flow from the Gulf, which means this trough is going to initiate a low pressure system out ahead of it and storms. Now the European model sweeps that through, and by Monday it's moving it into eastern Canada, and look at what builds behind it. A highly amplified pattern favoring another large trough. So we're going to watch what happens to the temperatures here behind this. So that's your setup as we go into this near-term forecast. So I'm going to go right to the European model. Now we've already seen through Tuesday, which is what we're looking at here, into Wednesday, and into Thursday. So this is the point where that frontal boundary is sagging here. We're still seeing the moisture getting pulled in, storms in the southeast, but this front here is connected up to a low that's running through the Hudson Bay. Now, as we go into Friday morning, Friday afternoon, this is where the new waves start to pull in out of the western parts of Canada. And as they pull in, you can start to see them gathering into some sort of low pressure with the frontal boundary here by Saturday evening. Now, if you notice, there's higher pressure here. So the flow is just generally going to feed more of that Gulf moisture back into this area. And as that front takes shape, you can see that Sunday, we're going to watch for probably a 2-day event here for the possibility of strong to severe storms, maybe Saturday into Sunday. We'll have to refine that timing later. And then that front just pushes east. As it continues to push east, it pushes right there, lines up along the East Coast, the Appalachian Mountains, down to Texas. And that gets us out there all the way to Tuesday, next Tuesday. So I come back to, whoops, there it is. And now you can see what is driving the better precipitation you're seeing here. What's not good about this is that the timing of the front currently pushes it past, central Nebraska and Kansas before the better storms come in here. We'll watch to see if that evolves at all this week to bring that rain farther back to the west. That'll be an important thing. But the next 7 days from the European model, total precipitation are seen here. So we still have more flooding going on down there. And then this is the GFS. And as I like to do, here's the comparison. This is the GFS and the European wetter here. GFS is wetter there. So a bit mixed in the midsection of the country, but the European remains the wetter model for the southern Mississippi River Valley into the southeast. From here, this is the probability of getting an inch of rain over the next 10 days. Let's step it up though and look at 2 inches. And then let's go to 4 inches. So we're still expecting a lot more heavy rain in this particular area, causing more flooding down south. But as we stated, going out there at the end of this week, the pattern is doing this. And I'm watching this wave very carefully. So I'll show you what it might do in terms of severe weather in a second. But notice that after it goes through, a trough of low pressure comes closer to the coast that pushes the ridge and opens things up a bit more in the middle part of the country. And as we get out there into the first week of September, the model spread is very large, and so we lose a lot of our signal, which makes this week 2 forecast at this point not that reliable. But before we get there, I just want to make a point. This is an index for severe storms that my colleague Andrew Pritchard made. This is Saturday night, so you can see we're opening up a corridor in through here of severe weather, of the potential for severe weather as that low comes out. And then going into Sunday night, I just want to make a point that we're going to have to watch this. Okay, watch the upper Midwest and the western Corn Belt as we go into this weekend. We'll just keep an eye on it at this point. But that week 2 pattern, just because of where the broader trough sits, now, so you remember it kind of comes up and around like this. This is a weak signal, but it continues to show wetter conditions here, mainly fed on just open Gulf moisture. So that is our outlook for precipitation over the next couple of weeks. Let's dive right into temperature. We'll do an international outlook and we'll be done. So here's Monday's highs. I already saw these into Tuesday and Wednesday. So pretty quick recovery of the heat in the plains. Low to mid-90s possible here, while the west still sees near triple digit in Central Valley of California and 90s in the Columbia Basin. But we're cool under that cloud cover here through Tuesday. Now remember, our first front advances on Wednesday. That's one that pushes up against the Rockies here in Montana, brings us scattered storms that kind of drape in this area. So from Wednesday into Thursday, the front advances. There's Friday's high temperatures compared to normal. And then as we get into the weekend, this will be a difficult forecast because of the timing of the storms. So we'll keep a close eye on what's going to be happening here going forward. But as you saw, once we get into the month of September, the ridge regains its position in the west. And that's why we see sliding out here through the first week of September above average temperatures that stretch from the west into the plains and then getting here into the Canadian prairie. There is no reason at this point to suspect an early frost event. I have no evidence that at some point in middle or into September that there could be a big frost coming through the upper Midwest. So we'll just have to keep watching it. But if the heat stays in the ocean and the jet stream stays weak and more a bit northward shifted, that would help prevent any sort of frost issue. Okay, let's quickly do an international update, and I want to start in Europe. First 10 days of August have now shown up on their drought monitor, and a substantial portion of the European Union is currently looking at some form of a drought warning. Okay, so this is there's a lot of very dry soil there. And if you just look out at the forecast, we're still quite warm across Europe, but the main heat event right now is setting up across Russia, right here into the western Russian wheat belt. But this does hit, Belarus, it hits Ukraine, it comes into Poland. So very hot conditions in here, and the storms are largely going to be farther to the west. From there, I would like to talk about China. So the precipitation pattern over the next 10 days looks just like it's looked for a while. Wetter in through here, drier on either side. And what I'm talking about here is that when you go and look at what's happening in China, the dryness in the south has really shown up in the NDVI imagery, diving way down here to the lowest in the 20-year time span. And you can click on any of these provinces and see, or any states or whatever. I actually don't remember what they're called in China, but just to see how low the NDVI values are. Whereas you can go north and see, much better values here where there's been more rains. So our latest soil moisture data looks like this. There's a stripe in through here where things have been wetter, but very dry in southern China. And a great resource for this, if you just go to the USDA, just type in USDA China crop production maps. That's how I would usually Google it. It's going to be that top hit. And you can come in here and look at any of the crops they grow and kind of get a sense on where certain things are grown. So cotton, Shandong, and then back over here into parts of western China. It's just a great resource to be using. Lastly, South America. There we go. This is the newest European outlook. That's a 46-day outlook from now until October 7th. And the biggest trend has been going over drier in southern Brazil. Now that is a typical La Niña signal. Now remember, we had some rain that moved through here last week, but it's looking drier in southern Brazil, wetter across northern Brazil. So this is a significant shift. Take a look. Here is the previous run. it was much wetter across a broader sector, but I think it was just being contaminated by some of the near-term rains there. So the newest data shows some drier conditions south, and if that encroaches any farther to the north, that will slow down planting progress in Brazil as things really start to get going here in about 15 to 20 days. So we have a story coming out of South America we're going to have to keep a close eye on, and I'll keep you up to date with what I know. But I hope you found this one informative and hopefully point you to some good tools. And we'll talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.